Hi, everybody, and good evening. And who says technology works smoothly? That's what I'd like to know. Anyway, first of all, a warm welcome to everyone who will be joining the stream live, and for those who will be watching it on replay. Do make sure that you subscribe, hit the notifications button on YouTube, so you don't miss any of the shows that come out from the channel. So that's a little bit of pre-show preamble from me. And without any further ado, let me welcome onto the stream my two guests. I'm delighted to have them both on the stream with me. We've got Roger Helmer and Bill Etheridge, both good friends of Open Dialogists. Hi, Roger. Hi, Bill.
Hi, David. Great to see you.
So listen, gentlemen, some stories you just can't ignore. And I've done my best to ignore this story for the last couple of years, but I'm afraid it's kind of exploded, and we're going to have to tackle it. And really, what we need to, I think, well, there's several aspects of this to look at. Really, I suppose. I mean, obviously, there's some things just struck me as being ironical. So, first of all, here's an image. Here we have two millionaires sitting down with a billionaire to discuss how awful their fate is, and I wondered, starting with you, Roger, what was your overall view of this interview before we go into the ramifications?
Well, I was a bit with that Sky News presenter who said you're going to need a bigger truck bucket, and I think a bigger truck bucket would have been the thing. It was absolutely sickeningly narcissistic. It was pure theatre, and of course we're dealing here with an actress, with a royal who is accustomed, of course, to dealing with the public. You're absolutely right. Well, the globe is going through a crisis. People are losing their jobs, losing their businesses, losing their relatives. People are dying. People are sick. And all they can do is talk about what a terrible hard time they've had and how little money they've had, given that he had, what was it, 10 million or 20 million for his mother? And he had huge amounts of money from Prince Charles for various purposes, including redecorating a home in England that they then up and left. My heart bleeds for them. The idea that we should be sorry for them is absurd. But the complaints they made, the narcissistic state of mind, just shocking.
So, okay, Roger's told it as he sees it. Bill, what was your overview of the interview?
Much of what Roger says, I go with. I felt so angry at one point that I actually felt almost sick with rage, because them talking about their problems, and it's an ongoing thing with royals that we've had now for decades about how, the problems that they face and how difficult it all is. But, I look at these people as public sector employees, and quite frankly, they get paid very, very handsomely for doing a job that, let's be honest, Prince Harry spoke about the princes being trapped into doing this job. If they don't want the job, I'll go for it tomorrow. No problem at all. Sign me up to all the trips round and all the adulation and all the influence. I'm perfectly willing here and now on this platform to say to Prince Harry and all the other princes, if it's too much hard work for you chaps, count me in. I think they were disrespectful to people who are suffering because of the effects of lockdown around the globe. And I think they laid a lot of very clever media traps, and they did it. I think it was well advised what they did. And I think that, as we'll probably discuss later, Mr. Morgan has fallen into one of their traps. And just the final observation, really, to start off with, I found it quite amusing that for 45 minutes, the only contribution that Prince Harry had was to try and communicate with the chickens. I think that just about sums up the relationship.
Well, I have to make a confession to you both and to those watching. I have not watched the interview because I could not afford to waste that amount of time in my life at this point.
Good call.
Watching a couple of, three narcissists discussing, their issues with each other. But I'll tell you one thing, guys, that struck me as well about this pair. Before we're going to talk about the Queen, and we're going to talk about what it means for the monarchy, and all that stuff. But just up front, I mean, this pair told us that they were leaving the UK and they wanted privacy. And so, do you remember they went into Canada, which is a pretty good place to go, by the way, if you really want to, get away from it all, up into the wilderness of the Canadian North. They went to Canada, lasted there a short while, and then in their further pursuit of privacy, they went to Malibu in California, and then on to Oprah. So, Roger, honestly, what do you say about them?
Well, that is an extraordinary piece of hypocrisy. By the way, can I just slip in how impressed I am with Bill's comment that he's prepared to go do the job? I've worked it out that I'm number 448,873,000th in line for the throne. So, maybe one day I'll make it. But it is really very shocking that they do that. But worse than that, if they had sat there saying, "Oh, we're so sad, we had a hard time, we weren't very comfortable in the UK," that would have been sickening enough. But the direct attacks on a 94-year-old monarch whose 99-year-old husband is seriously ill in hospital with a heart condition, this has been commented on so many times, and yet it remains very, very shocking. It is really quite preposterous. And the accusations of racism, which I hope we'll be talking about in a bit more detail, are just disgraceful, particularly because what did we get? We got Meghan saying, well, she had been told by Harry. Harry saying, I'm not going to tell you what was said, and I'm not going to tell you who said it, but it was a racist slur. So nobody can defend themselves. I mean, Bill mentioned media traps, and I think that's the media trap, that they cannot defend themselves. They don't know who said what. It's just an extraordinary situation.
Well, actually, just following on from that, it does put the royal family in a very difficult position, given the nature. I mean, there was essentially, Bill, two damning implications or allegations. Number one, that somebody somewhere was being a bit racist towards Archie. The other implication was that the royal family didn't take Meghan's mental unwellness and their suicidal feelings seriously and to be helpful. So those are the two allegations. Very hard to argue to respond to that, I would suggest.
They were very well planned out accusations. And this is the thing, the whole narrative that you so well spelt out there about them moving around and, we want some privacy, but they're only in the private place for a short time. And then they move on and they move towards the spotlight. This has been pre-planned. And it's very, very well planned, by the way, because as much as many people in the UK are horrified by this, people around the world aren't. People around the world are actually starting to take their side. Now, the accusations they've made, first and foremost, the racism thing, well, we all know just how dangerous those accusations are. It doesn't matter what you do or what you say. Once that's been said, it sticks. But the very thought that the Queen the upper echelons of the royal family who've spent decades touring the Commonwealth and putting the Commonwealth front and centre of everything they think about could be racist, when you look at that the majority of the people in the Commonwealth aren't white, is ludicrous. But the really dangerous one is the mental health one, because with mental health, and it's a subject I've taken quite some interest in, you can't disprove it. You can't say she's made that up because you don't know. You simply don't know. Now that is either a perfect trap, or somebody within the workings of the palace doesn't know their employment law, doesn't know the way that you're supposed to deal with people who raise these issues, because you can't question it. You have to handle it. And that is the current environment on these things. So brilliantly laid traps. I think the racism one is garbage. I think the mental health one is a very serious one that needs to be looked at.
Well, I mean, that's interesting. One of the things, Roger, about Her Majesty, I think, looking back in her long period on the throne is. Both her and Philip, Prince Philip, have devoted a lot of their efforts to the Commonwealth. And I spotted this headline. Let me just share this headline with you guys. Backlash in Commonwealth after Harry and Meghan's claim of racism. And this story goes on to say, Roger, that in certain Commonwealth countries, following the racism allegations, certain countries are thinking, oh, we don't want to have a head of state who's a racist. So I take Bill's point, and he's right on the mental health, 100% on that one, Bill. But the racist one is nasty and very hurtful to Her Majesty, I would think, in particular, given the Commonwealth.
Well, absolutely, I agree with you, and I'm astonished and a bit disappointed if the Commonwealth or parts of the Commonwealth are taking that view. But can we look at this racism claim? All that is claimed is that Meghan was told by Harry that somebody had asked a question about the possible skin colour of any child that they might have. Now that's it wouldn't be admitted in a court of law. It's hearsay. He won't say what was said. She says he was told, but she doesn't know. She said she concluded it was racist. I noted that particularly. I almost want to go back and look at it again and get the exact words. She didn't say it was a racist comment. She said, my view is it can only have been racist. Now, can I just share with you a personal fact? I am engaged to be married, and the lady to whom I am engaged to be married is she's British citizen, but she is of Indian extraction. Both her parents were born in India. They came to Britain a little before she was born. Now, it will astonish you, I'm sure, to learn that we have no plans to have children. But at the same time, if we were 40 years younger and we were planning to have children, I'm sure we would discuss what sort of children we hope to have, what they would be like, what sort of careers we wanted for them, and indeed what sort of appearance. I mean, I've noticed that mixed race children are often very attractive. So we would talk about that. And I tweeted that recently and got the usual stick from the trolls over it. So I was really rather impressed to listen to the Today programme this morning. And I don't normally have a good word to say for the Today programme, but they actually had a mixed race woman and her daughter on for an interview. And the woman said virtually what I have said. In any family, if you have that sort of situation and you're expecting a baby of mixed race, of course you're going to discuss what it looks like. No offense intended, no offense taken. And the idea that you can't discuss that within a family. I mean, if somebody walked up in the pub to Meghan when she was evidently pregnant and said, bloody hell, I don't know what colour your baby's going to be, that would be offensive and racist. But to discuss it in the family is entirely normal. So even if the question was asked and the question was put, it wasn't racism, or there's no reason I can see to believe it was racist, unless there was some specific pejorative and negative opinion attached to it, and we have no evidence that that was the case.
Well, Bill, there's also a couple of other points. First of all, Meghan Markle is not black. First of all, contrary to how the media have been playing this one, she is 1/4 black, to be precise. Point number one. And point number two, Bill, isn't it strange? If she cares so much about her kids, how come she decided to choose going on the Oprah show to reveal the fact she's going to have a baby girl? I mean, again, the hypocrisy with this pair is actually cosmic, don't you think?
Well, the answer to the last point is ratings. The earlier stuff, Meghan Markle, I didn't actually know, because I take very little interest in the soap opera of the royal family. So I didn't realise there was any different ethnicity to her at all until she started going on about it a couple of years ago. And to add to the personal anecdotes very quickly, when my dad has got, even now when he's 80, he got black hair and was sort of olive skinned. And my mum was much whiter. When my dad told me this, I didn't realise this, but when I was when I was conceived and mum was pregnant, there was a lot of discussion within our family about what kind of colouring I would come out as, because they were so very different. I actually think I'm darker than Meghan Markle in the way I look. And having researched our family tree back and seen portraits of ancestors, everyone for centuries down our line was black-haired and dark-skinned. But, the DNA is British.
Yeah.
So it's something you just discuss. It isn't a big deal. It certainly isn't racist. What if they said, "Oh, I hope the baby doesn't come out with ginger hair"? Would that be offensive? It's probably something that someone might have thought. It's simply just conjecture within a family and totally normal.
Oh, absolutely right. And as someone who's married to a redhead, and whose daughter is a redhead, and whose granddaughter is a redhead, I fully embrace the point you've just made. But here's the point, Roger. Here's the point. With this one, I think there may be a UK versus US different angle. So I get the feeling that in the UK, broadly speaking, Meghan doesn't go down very well. I saw her popularity ratings have dropped today, for example, into negative, whereas Her Majesty's have just gone down a little bit. But over in the States, where they lap up this kind of soap opera stuff, as you've both referred to it, was Meghan in particular playing to, do you think, an American audience to garner sympathy, knowing that Britain's a lost cause anyway, basically, but she may as well damage the royal family when she's at it?
Well, you're absolutely right. I'm sure they are planning to be in America for the long term, and I'm sure she is looking at her opportunities either in the entertainment business, or there are even rumors that she may have political ambitions. By the way, if they left Britain because Britain was so racist, I think if you actually look at the background of Britain and America, the great majority of public opinion would say America is a more racist country than Britain is.
Totally agree.
That's very much the case. And the trouble is that the Oprah Winfrey show does carry in America a lot of credibility. And one of the things that I am discouraged by in the media coverage is that most of the media, most of the time, are discussing it as if it were true, everything that Meghan said. I don't think it necessarily is. I mean, I recently tweeted saying that whatever, nobody can expect a sort of divine right to be believed, not even the sainted Markle. I got people coming back to me saying, "Oh, well, are the royal family especially protected and you're not allowed to criticize them?" And I said, not at all. I didn't say that. What I do say, though, is that if you're making particularly outrageous and damaging criticisms, then you should be subjected to a higher level of analysis. And I really feel badly about Piers Morgan because he took the view that she wasn't telling the truth. And you can make a good case as to why several of the things she said just don't sound credible at all. Obviously, for example, she felt she had mental health problems and she went and consulted the HR department in the palace. Well, she and Harry have been doing charity work in the mental health area. Yeah. The idea that she had nobody else to talk to about mental health issues apart from the palace personnel officer is just bizarre. But what is also bizarre is the way the media are simply, to a large extent, not exclusively, but to a large extent, the media are just accepting it at face value. You can't challenge racism. You can't challenge if somebody claims to have mental health problems. You can't doubt that. You've got to accept it and be sympathetic and so on. Yes, of course we should be sympathetic to people with mental health problems. But somebody who just shows up and says, "I've got a mental health problem," in circumstances where they stand to benefit on the opera show from having mental health problems, I think we're entitled to say, is it credible? And personally, I'm with Piers. I don't find it credible.
Well, since you've brought up Piers, let's jump into this one, Bill, because as we know, Piers Morgan is leaving, has left Good Morning Britain, another program, by the way, I never watch. He's leaving over the comments he made on Monday on the show. And he's repeated the comments to a degree today, where he basically said, "Bill, look, I've been asked to fundamentally apologize and take back my words. I'm not going to do that. I don't believe basically a word that she said, in his opinion. Other people are welcome to have other opinions. But nonetheless, Piers Morgan, who's a pretty heavyweight media personality, has been booted out the door because he chose to dissent from the media narrative that Rogers just mentioned. You know, you must believe Meghan. So what do you think of the Piers Morgan scenario, Bill?
It's an interesting one for me because it's a little bit like watching a football match between two sides you can't stand. Because I absolutely detest Piers Morgan and I absolutely detest Meghan Markle. I think that Piers Morgan's defence that he's some kind of champion of free speech is absolutely ludicrous. This is a man who's blocked half of Twitter. And for those of us who've had the very unpleasant experience of being interviewed by him, he shouts across you, you can't get a sentence out. So when he talks about free speech, he's actually talking about his free speech and our freedom to listen. Having said all that, I do have some sympathy for the remarks that he made about the interview and the fact he casted some doubt on it. But I find it astonishing that he's actually got in trouble for doing this after spending a whole year terrifying the nation over COVID, which is far more serious. But in short, I think that he had a right to express his opinion about whether or not he thought it was correct. But it is dangerous territory when you talk about mental health. It really is, because some of the people who have mental health issues don't appear to have them. Then you might think, well, what's wrong with their life? Everything's great with their life. But it is a complex sphere, and you never can tell with that. So, and I slightly for one of the rare times, a slightly diverge rather from Roger's point of view about this, where I think you do have to take it on face value if someone says they've got an issue, because the consequences of not actually are very, very serious for the person who's crying out. And they might have a mental health issue over something that you or I might think is complete balderdash, but the brain is different from person to person, and we simply don't know. So that's the one side of her story that I'm not going to dump on. The rest of it, I think, is pure cobblers. But I think that side of it, I think we have to be a little bit more cautious about.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point in the mental health dimension to it. I think that's where Piers came a cropper, because he did suggest, I think, on Monday that she was probably he didn't believe that she had any issues really. And as you say, and Roger, it's a matter of, I think, probably law, that if basically in Britain anyway, if you say you've got the issue, this mental health issue, then it has to be taken seriously. It just does. I mean, some people have said, there's some cynics on the stream here. I see some of you have suggested that maybe Piers wanted to bail out anyway to get himself a billet on another soon-to-be-launched TV channel called GB News. I don't know if that's true or not. But, I mean, I have to say, Bill, or Roger, that Piers Morgan has annoyed me for a very long time. He blocked me. He blocked me last year on Twitter because I took issue with him on something or another. And as Bill says as well, he spent the last year terrorizing the nation over COVID. But all the same, having said that, I still do believe that people should have. I mean, what's the point of having someone on TV who's like, as Morgan is there, Roger, he's there to give his opinions, right or wrong, and the minute he gives the wrong opinion, he's out the door. What's the point?
Well, I am fairly shocked by that, I have to say. And I agree with you. We should take mental health seriously. But it's a bit like back pain, isn't it? Back pain is notorious that doctors find it difficult to diagnose. They have to take the patient's word for it.
Yeah.
And if you want to get time off work, well, back pain's great. But I'm sure we should take it seriously and by all means go and see a psychiatrist, have an assessment, have discussions with them, sort it out. And I would suggest if you think you have a mental health problem, you are better to do that privately rather than on the Oprah Winfrey show. So I'm not saying don't take it seriously, but I am saying it isn't always necessarily true. There are mental health conditions where people report illnesses they don't have. Now, I'm not saying she's got that, but I'm just giving it as an example. It isn't always true when people say they have an illness. And it does fit a narcissistic narrative extremely well. poor me, you should be sympathetic.
Simple question, Roger. Should Piers Morgan have been forced out? Yes or no?
Absolutely not. No, it's disgraceful. You're absolutely right. He is entitled to his opinion, and he's paid to come up with contentious opinions. When he does so, we're saying he was fired. I think actually technically he resigned, but clearly he came under pressure to leave.
Yeah, I mean, Bill, do you think to the point was it wrong for him to be put in a position where he basically had to leave?
Over this issue, yeah. On this issue, I think a simple clarification where he could have said something along the lines of what we've all just said about taking the mental health side seriously, but he has his doubts, would have been sufficient. As I say, I find it extraordinary that this is the issue he's in trouble over. He's played a part in wrecking a whole nation for a year, and yet he's in trouble for questioning the word of this American actress. It's quite remarkable.
But, we've used the word narcissist quite a bit. And I think Piers Morgan is an ultimate narcissist, to be quite honest.
That too.
And I think, Roger, I think I'm right in saying that at one point he was friendly with Meghan Markle. That they had at least they mixed in a similar circle. And then she blanked him and cut him out. So I'm not sure if he's been carrying a sort of a grudge against her and by default Harry. But in all of this, Roger, Harry, it's as if he has no say in what goes on. I saw this. I'll put this up just to give us all a laugh. This cheered me up enormously. You may have seen this meme. But you needed a John Lennon in the Beatles for Yoko to take away. And did John Lennon have no say in it? Does Harry have no say in the life that he now leads? Where's Harry's responsibilities, Roger?
Yeah, this is one of the most extraordinary factors of it, that there is Harry saying, oh, he was trapped, and Prince Charles is trapped, and Prince William is trapped. This is just incredible. But the bizarre thing is that to all appearances, and this is not original, everybody is saying it, the papers are full of it, Harry looks unhappy. He doesn't make clear his own opinions very much. He mainly defers to Meghan. And I would say, from my reading of the situation, what I've seen in the media, I would say that he is now more trapped than he has ever been. And I think he is missing his former life, he's missing his family, he's missing his military connections and the work that he did, and he is a bit like a fish out of water. He is clinging to Meghan because she is, as it were, his lifeline in a very uncomfortable and unfamiliar situation. So we will see how that shapes up. By the way, in terms of interviewing, of course they would choose to be interviewed by an extremely sympathetic interviewer,
yes.
Who is, we're told, is an old friend, although I read in the paper today that they had only met once before the wedding.
Yeah.
And she was invited to the wedding. She was a sympathetic interviewer. Wouldn't it be nice if we got somebody like Andrew Neil or Jeremy Paxman, perhaps, to interview them? Of course, they wouldn't agree to be interviewed. But no. My word, that would be a different program, and I would watch that with great interest.
Yeah, but unfortunately, and it's one of those things that's never going to happen. But Bill, on Harry again, just to stay on him, one of the extraordinary things, and I'm very ambivalent in this. In the interview, he complained about the fact that his dad had refused. Prince Charles had apparently refused to take 2 phone calls from him, whatever. And that may be true, it may not be. But I'm thinking to myself, this is a 36-year-old man complaining about the fact at 36 that his dad didn't take a couple of phone calls from him. So there's that. And then the other thing that balances it in my mind, I still remember the images of him walking behind, along with Prince William, his mother's coffin. I can remember that. And go back to the mental health thing again, Bill. There's no doubt in my mind that an event like that is such a scarring event. So, it's easy to mock Harry, and it's very easy to do, and he makes himself an easy target these days, hooked up with Meghan. But maybe could there be something their bill relating back to the death of the very public death of his mother and all that went around with that explains where we are now with him.
I think that during this conversation, we've sort of highlighted the fact that I think there are mental health issues quite possibly involved in this whole relationship. I think that, when we were talking about Meghan, the word narcissism has been used many times. That is a symptom of mental illness. It's a well-known symptom of a whole range of mental illnesses. And as for Prince Harry, well, yeah, I mean, he not only did he lose his mother very young and in a very public manner, but he also served on active duty. And there's a possible chance he might have some kind of post-traumatic stress from one or both of those things. And there is a real change in the man, and the way the body language goes when they're together, it's quite clear that he is submissive to a dominant partner within the relationship, and he has lost his own independence. And this mention about Prince Charles not returning the calls, and he's got a gripe about Prince Charles cutting off his money and things like that as well. Now, I think that again goes back to some probably quite serious mental health considerations, where this man is perhaps still a boy in some respects, and he's still stuck in some of the trauma and some of the issues that happened in his childhood and in his earlier life, and this is why he's fallen in to the situation he's into. Having said all that, it doesn't excuse the behaviour, but it does suggest to me that there's a lot more to this than perhaps meets the eye initially, and that both of them perhaps have some issues that they could do some help with.
Yeah, I mean, some of the comments in the stream are quite interesting here. We've got magnetic vortex resonance. They're saying that residing in California was carefully thought out by this woman. Well, I think there's a kind of a general consensus here amongst us that this did not just happen accidentally. There's been a degree of manipulation. And then Angela says, David, hundreds of thousands of kids lose their parents. They are scarred in different ways for life. Harry was 100% supported. Angela, don't really totally agree. Yes, you're absolutely right. Hundreds of thousands of kids lose their parents. But how many have the funeral put on global TV and have their lives? You know, I mean, that camera is zoning in as you make the lonely walk behind the coffin. I only can think of how horrific that must be. But, you know, also, Angela, just by balance, I do agree that she's a pretty glamorous looking woman, and he fell hook, line, and sinker for her. She saw him coming. I think she did. There's loads of memes I'm sure you've seen on Twitter and elsewhere on this one, and they all paint Harry as a submissive. He is basically doing what she says. But I want to bring the stream to an end pretty soon. But where do you think this one's going to end? Is it going to end in the divorce courts, or is it just going to end up? They'll just disappear into the Californian sunset. Roger.
Well, I had thought that it was likely to end up in the divorce courts. Now, having seen the interview, he now seems to be dependent upon her. It's almost the Stockholm syndrome. And so he will cling to that lifeline. And I don't know how long he'll go on clinging. But if I could offer him a word of advice, and he won't hear it, and he wouldn't ask me for a word of advice anyway. And by the way, I'm not a religious person. But I would suggest to Prince Harry that he goes to the New Testament and reads the parable of the prodigal son, who left home to have a great life, and it all fell apart. And he finally realized he was better off at home. And he went home to his parents and he said, Father, I am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me therefore as one of thy hired servants. Sooner or later, I think he has to go home and admit he's made a terrible mistake.
I often actually think he should redesignate himself as the prince formerly known as Prince. Anyway, Bill, I mean, where do you think this one's going to end?
Well, I think there's two answers to that. I think in the case of Harry and Meghan, I think it's going to end in some serious emotional issues, and I think that there is something very, very dark and sad going on in that relationship, and I don't think it necessarily will end in divorce, but I think it will end in some kind of tragedy or some kind of tears. But then there's another answer to this as well. Where is it going? And I hope we can discuss this on another stream sometime, because
Yep.
where it takes us is a conversation about the future of the royal family. And quite frankly, I have questioned for some time why someone just by dint of birth should be the head of state. But I've always tempered that by saying, well, the Queen is superb. And I have nothing but enormous respect for the Queen. She's done a fantastic job. However, when you look at the rest of them in that line, I have no confidence that they would be any better or any worse than some bloke off the street who might stand for election and do it for a 4-year term. And, you know, I don't hold with the belief in royalty. I think that we're all born with the same rights, the same humanity. And just because they come from a blue-blooded line doesn't mean that we should bow and scrape to anyone. And frankly, without the Queen, I question whether or not this current system should continue. And I am strongly verging towards suggesting that there's got to be a better way. Because I don't want Prince Charles and his crazed green ideas at the head of the state. And I don't want the dysfunctional rest of them carrying on a soap opera at our expense across the world's media and damaging our country without the chance of getting rid of them short of a revolution and putting their heads on a spike, which I think probably we've outgrown those days. So, although I'm tempted towards it.
Well, actually, maybe Roger, just do you want to respond to that in terms of how you see it?
Yeah, I think Bill has perfectly illustrated the depth of the damage which Harry and Meghan, but Harry particularly, has done to the royal family. He loves and respects his grandmother. The hell he does. He wouldn't behave towards her like that. Here I part company, and you'll be delighted to hear I can disagree with Bill about something at least. I part company a bit with Bill. I am a monarchist. I support the monarchy as an institution, but I distinguish between the monarchy as an institution and the individuals who are temporarily holding the reins, as it were. Like Bill, I have enormous respect for the Queen, and I cannot hear a word against her. Like Bill, I am deeply unimpressed by Prince Charles's green lunacy, and rather concerned that William, who would likely follow him in fairly quick succession, seems to be tarred with the same brush, the same green brush. The only hope there I see is that if and when Charles becomes king, the tradition is that the monarch does not adopt political positions. So I hope he might quiet down a bit then. But yes, I think we can talk about why we think Prince Charles is not ideal, and Prince William may or may not be. He looks more the part. But as far as I'm concerned, the institution has lasted for 1,000 years, and I don't want to be any part of a move to change that.
I kind of feel it's a bit like when people criticize, democracy and the imperfections in democracy, and then you ask the question, well, what's your alternative? And it's probably better than some of the alternatives. And again, I fear to say we probably all kind of agree. I certainly, Roger, would be pretty much along your position. The institution has, broadly speaking, served us well broadly, but Bill's the questions regarding Charles, and in fact the dynasty, it's a very dysfunctional institution. Let's be honest. I mean, I see people have mentioned Prince Andrew. We'll not go into the details of why they may have said that, but it is. I mean, Her Majesty and Prince Philip, I think, have led exemplary role models and all. I think they've been great. But when I look at the family, it's just not been good, Bill, has it? I mean, maybe they reflect modern Britain, though. Maybe the royal family, because they are so blooming dysfunctional, maybe modern Britain is dysfunctional, and all they're doing is reflecting it. What do you think?
Well, yeah, they probably do. But the point is that if they're in this exalted position as the ideal family, the ones we're supposed to bow to and curtsy and all the rest of it, then they should be a bit better than that. And they frankly aren't. I would certainly keep them going to look after the castles and the palaces and to turn out for the tourists. I might even consider privatizing them and selling shares in them. What might be a good idea as a British Disneyland. But in terms of running the role of head of state, I simply, when you take the Queen out of the equation, and I pray and hope that's many, many years away, but when you take the Queen out of the equation, I simply don't believe that anyone can say to me there is a strong argument that those following down the line would do any better job as head of state than any one of a number of people who could stand for a 4-year term as a president and do the job just the same. I don't see it. I just don't see why we have to put up with this constant embarrassment, these dysfunctional people who frankly show all the signs of not being quite all there, and we have to pay for it, and we have to allow them to represent us on the world stage. If they were elected, we could vote them out.
Yeah, well, I mean, as you say, I mean, this does open up a very interesting conversation regarding the future constitutional status of the UK, and there's arguments both ways. Having said that, Bill, if the royal family are tuning in and they've heard what you've said, I think the next interview with you will be from the Tower of London. But Roger, we will visit you, and we will we bring Sam.
Thank you very much.
So look,
Don't
folks,
steal the jewels.
So look, Roger and Bill, thank you both very much for being on the stream. It's a little bit shorter than normal, but look, thank you both for being on the stream. Thanks, folks. I see there's some new people on the stream. Thank you for being. I hope you've enjoyed it for the last 40 minutes or so. The chat on Harry and Meghan and all the issues surrounding that. So I hope you've enjoyed that. Please make sure that you share the channel. Please make sure that you subscribe on YouTube in particular. And Bill will be back with his program, I think, tomorrow night, Bill. So make sure you watch Bill tomorrow evening. I'll be back with you, same place next week. In the meantime, everyone stay well and healthy, and we'll catch up then. That's it from us for tonight. Good night, everybody.
Good night.